We decided to entitle it When AI is Not the Solutions Towards Integral Co-Design Processes. And so this project strives to move away from technological solutionism and critically examine if AI could be implemented to solve a contextualized problem, and doing it in a way such that all processes could align with a specific set of principles. So we work with a multidisciplinary team. So people in the team are Ivan. He's an AI researcher at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Gabi, she's an indigenous interpreter who works at the Indigenous Professional Center for Counseling, Defense, and Translation, which from now on I'll call CEPIADET. Antonio, he's a researcher at the linguistics section of the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Yucatan. And myself, I'm an AI ethics researcher at Barcelona's Supercomputing Center. So in addition to our research team, we collaborated with the following indigenous interpreters. So there's Angélica, Donaldo, Ernesto, Flor, José Antonio, Jovita, Juan, Virginia, and Gabriela. So just very briefly, this project began with a series of conversations with CEPIADET, where they highlighted the interpretation as a key element to guarantee access to justice for indigenous people in Mexico. So just to give a brief idea of why this is an issue, so I'm going to talk very briefly about interpretation and access to justice for indigenous people in Mexico. So first, it's important to highlight that there is a regulatory framework which guarantees indigenous people the individual and collective right to be assisted by interpreters in all legal procedures. And it is the state's responsibility to provide the necessary resources, which includes the certification and training of indigenous interpreters to guarantee this right. However, currently there's a big gap between the regulation and its implementation and the practice of interpreters. So this has led to interpreters to experience several labor problems. Some of them include the lack of contracts, so the lack of formal work, irregularities with the payments or the lack of them, and they also face discrimination within the legal system. To give an idea of why this issue is important, so in Mexico, more than 7 million people speak indigenous languages. This represents 6.1% of the country's population. And in particular in Oaxaca, which is the state with the largest numerical and structural linguistical diversity, 91% of indigenous people who are incarcerated did not have interpretation assistance. So this is a big issue. This project proposed to design a conversational agent that will allow for interpreters to collectively first make visible the problems that they face to develop their work, to have greater agency and power in decision-making and policy-making on issues related to interpretations, particularly in the field of justice. And we wanted for the conversational agent to also allow them to collectively build knowledge and resources useful for them to their work. So in order to do this project, we designed a methodology which aimed to promote in all processes the principles of co-design, collaboration, shared benefits, data sovereignty, digital autonomy, and gender perspective. So this methodology, among other things, included the development of a research protocol and collaborations agreements, mainly with the intentions to balance the power relations between the research group and the different actors, which included not only individual interpreters, but groups of interpreters. And another key element of this protocol was to create strategies to implement the care principles for indigenous data management, which were developed by the Indigenous Data Alliance, GIDA, And the principles are collective benefits, autonomy to control, responsibility, and ethics. So in order to do this research, a central part of the work was focused on having workshops with indigenous interpreters. So these are the list of collaborators that I mentioned in the second slide. So the idea of these workshops was to anchor the work on the feminist practices of listening and situated knowledge, to balance knowledge asymmetries, to contextualize the participants with respect to technology, data management, and other related issues, and to incorporate the interpreters' views, needs, and aspirations, not only into the system design, but into the methodology. So we decided to do 3 workshops. So one of them was on conversational agents. So in this, well, one of them in indigenous data sovereignty and another one on gender. So I'm very briefly gonna explain each of the workshops. So first, the workshop regarding conversational agents focus on contextualizing the interpreters on AI benefits, risks, and ethical concerns, and explore their technological expectations and their needs. So then the indigenous data sovereignty workshop centered around the idea of indigenous data sovereignty, and it reflected on how data relates to, well, data sovereignty relates to the indigenous rights of autonomy and self-determination. And finally, the workshop on gender aimed to incorporate gender perspective into the system and into the work, and it will allow us to then, for example, create a conversational agent which will allow to map gender inequality or gender violence. It's important to say these workshops took place in Oaxaca in October 2022. And so now I'm going to talk a bit about the design proposed for the conversational agents, the agent and the requirements that we needed in order for the agent to align with the given principles. So first, it was important for the users to actively collaborate with the production of the resources and tools through the recurrent interaction with the system. So remember, we wanted them to be able to build collective knowledge. So for example, they could collaborate on building a glossary of legal terms that are useful for them while they're interpreting. And then another key aspect for us was to be able to transfer the technology to group of interpreters. So in order to do that, it will be essential for this group of interpreters to possess a structure that will allow for the transfer of the technology. So this means that they will be able to operate, monitor, and control independent and autonomous conversational agents. So while we were in the workshops, we identified the following functions that the indigenous interpreters would like the agent to perform. First, they would like to ask for work schedule information. For example, when is their next hearing, or when do they have their next appointments? So they would like to share their experiences with the agent. For example, they would like to share if they were experiencing some discrimination or violence. They would like to be able to access formats to create contracts. They would like to be able to collect payment information. As I mentioned, this is one of the main issues that they're experiencing. So there's a lot of delays on the payments, or sometimes the payments never come. So in addition to that, they would like to consult practical information related to their work as interpreters. And they would like to consult general information, in particular regarding updates on laws and regulations. So, so the results of the workshops highlighted 2 important features. First, we couldn't identify an organizational structure within the group of interpreters that we collaborated with, which will allow us to transfer the technology. So this will limit the implementation of the principles of data sovereignty and digital autonomy. And secondly, we identify that the users' expectations, so indigenous interpreters' expectations, at least the ones that we collaborated with, didn't have the intention to take an active role on building collective knowledge. So it was decided that at the time being, AI was not the tool to be used to help them with the issues that they're facing. In this respect, we found other outcomes which will be better suited for the context and the group of people who collaborated with. So first of it will be the creation of a space for direct communication and collaboration among interpreters. This could be technically solved with internet forums or with team communication platforms. And secondly, so the use of tools for the creation of shared resources, such as the glossary I mentioned, and this could be managed by wikis or any other open source platforms. And in addition to the work, we created a media piece which makes visible the experiences of the interpreters who collaborated with us. There is videos in which they share their experiences and their views on indigenous language interpretation in their own languages. And this media piece could be accessed at the link provided below. And that will be all. Thanks.